Hi, I'm Rachel Monroe, and for years my sister painted me as the family's disgrace. She never missed a chance to mock me, even in front of strangers. But the day she tried to ruin me in front of a doctor, fate brought someone through the door who turned her lies into dust. The first time I remember understanding that my sister and I lived in two different worlds. I was 7 years old. It was my birthday party, held in the small, patchy backyard of our house in Ohio. The sun was bright, the grass was itchy, and I was wearing a yellow dress my mother had bought me, one that I loved because it made me feel like a dandelion. My friends from school were there, and we had just finished a chaotic game of tag. My father carried out the cake, my mother beaming behind him. They set it on the picnic table. It was a simple sheet cake with my name, Rachel, written in wobbly, blue icing. I was thrilled. But then, my mother clapped her hands together. "Okay, everyone, before we have cake, presents for the birthday girl." My father brought out a large, beautifully wrapped box. It was covered in shiny pink paper with a perfect silver bow. I had never seen a present so grand. My heart thumped. I reached for it, my small hands trembling with excitement. "Oh, not that one, sweetie," my mother said, gently pushing my hands away. "That's a special present for later." My friends gave me their gifts, coloring books, a set of jacks, a doll. I thanked each of them, but my eyes kept darting to the big pink box. Finally, after the last small gift was opened, I looked at my mother. "Can I open the big one now?" She smiled and exchanged a look with my father. "Of course, but that one is for Erin, too. It's a sister gift." I didn't understand. It was my birthday. Erin, who was 9, had been sitting on the steps looking bored the whole time. She perked up immediately. We opened the box together, tearing at the paper. Inside was a magnificent dollhouse, 3 stories tall with tiny furniture and little flower boxes under the windows. It was the most wonderful thing I had ever seen. "Wow," I breathed, reaching for a tiny chair. Erin slapped my hand away. "I get to set it up first. I'm older." She immediately began arranging the furniture, claiming the biggest bedroom for her favorite doll. My mother knelt beside her. "Isn't this lovely, Erin? You'll take good care of it, won't you?" My father patted my head. "It's your dollhouse too, Rach. You just have to share." But I knew, even then, that it wasn't mine. It was Erin's dollhouse, given on my birthday. I was an afterthought. I watched them, my sister and mother, cooing over the miniature rooms, and felt a cold, hollow space open up inside my chest. I looked down at my yellow dress and no longer felt like a dandelion. I just felt small. This pattern repeated itself, over and over, in ways big and small. When I was in 4th grade, I was accused of cheating on a math test. I hadn't. The boy behind me had been copying my answers, and the teacher saw me looking back to tell him to stop. I was sent home with a note. I was terrified, crying as I tried to explain to my parents what really happened. My father looked stern. My mother looked disappointed. Erin, who was doing her homework at the kitchen table, piped up without looking up from her book. "She's always been sneaky," she said calmly. "She probably did it. She's not that good at math anyway." That was it. The case was closed. My parents' faces hardened. My explanation was just a lie. Erin's casual comment was the truth. I was grounded for 2 weeks. I had to write an apology letter to the teacher. The injustice of it burned in my stomach. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me. It was how easily they accepted Erin's version, how her words had the power to shape my reality. I learned to be quiet. I learned to retreat into books, into worlds where things made sense, where heroes were good and villains were bad, and the truth always came out in the end. I excelled in school. It was the one place where the rules were clear. If you did the work, you got the grade. No one could twist that. But even that became a problem. My straight A's were not a source of pride for my family. They were a source of concern. "You spend too much time in your room with those books. Rachel," my mother would say at dinner, passing the mashed potatoes, "you need to be more like your sister. Go out, make friends." Erin, who was a cheerleader and effortlessly popular, would give me a pitying look across the table. "It's not her fault, Mom. Some people are just awkward." When I was a senior in high school, I received an acceptance letter to the state university. Tucked inside was another letter informing me I'd been awarded a significant academic scholarship. It would cover nearly all of my tuition. I felt like I could fly. I ran downstairs waving the papers. I got in. I got a scholarship. My father glanced at it. Well, that's good. Saves us some money. My mother hugged me briefly. That's wonderful, dear. But are you sure you're ready? It's a big campus. You know you get overwhelmed so easily. Erin was on the phone, but she hung up to join the conversation. Ohio State? That's a huge party school. Are you sure you'll fit in, Rachel? She asked, her voice laced with fake concern. You don't want to get in over your head. The joy drained out of me, replaced by a familiar anxiety. They had done it again. They had taken my biggest achievement and turned it into a weakness. Another piece of evidence for the case they were building against me. Rachel, the fragile one. Rachel, the unstable one. The worst part was, a small part of me started to believe them. Maybe I was too fragile. Maybe I would be overwhelmed. Their version of me was so consistent, so unwavering, that it felt more real than my own. But another part of me, a small, stubborn kernel of defiance, decided to go anyway. I had to. It was my only way out. College was exactly what I needed it to be. Anonymous. For the first time, I wasn't Erin's little sister. I was just Rachel Monroe, a face in a lecture hall of 300 students. I was terrified and lonely, but I was also free. I clung to the structure of my classes like a life raft. The world of academia was logical. An argument was either sound or it wasn't. A calculation was either correct or incorrect. It was a relief. From the shifting emotional landscape of my home, I found my passion in an introductory accounting class. Most people found it dry, but I loved it. I loved the order, the precision, the way every number had its place and every column had to balance. It was like a puzzle with a single right answer. In a world where truth had always been subjective, dictated by my sister's whims, the certainty of numbers felt like a sanctuary. I took a forensic accounting class my junior year, taught by a professor named Dr. Albright. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had spent 20 years working for the FBI. He saw something in me that my family never had. You have a good mind for this, Monroe, he told me after I'd found a subtle error in a case study that everyone else had missed. You don't just see the numbers, you see the story they're trying to tell. You see the lie. His words were like water on parched earth. It was the first time an authority figure had validated my skills without a single reservation. His encouragement was the reason I pursued it as a career. After graduation, I moved to a city a few hours away. I got a small, clean apartment with a window that looked out over a parking lot, and I loved it because it was mine. I started at a mid-sized accounting firm, doing audits. The work was meticulous and demanding, and I was good at it. I was slowly, quietly building a life that had nothing to do with my family's narrative of me. But the narrative followed, me. I'd go home for holidays, and the dynamic would snap right back into place. Erin was married by then, to a man who ran his father's car dealership. They lived in a big house in the suburbs. She didn't have a career, but she was on the board of 3 different charities. She was, in my parents' eyes, a complete success. I was 30, single, living in an apartment, and had a job they didn't understand. It's just so tedious. What you do, Erin said one Thanksgiving, swirling wine in her glass. Staring at spreadsheets all day. I would lose my mind. It's interesting, I said weakly. You get to solve puzzles. Well, as long as it makes you happy, my mother said, her tone suggesting she couldn't possibly imagine how it would. I once made the mistake of showing my emotions. My cat, a quiet companion who had been with me for 10 years, passed away. I was devastated. I called my mom, crying, needing some comfort. The next day, Erin called me. Mom told me about your cat, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. Are you okay? I mean, it's a little worrying how upset you are. It was just an animal. Mom and Dad are concerned you're not handling the pressure of living alone very well. I felt the blood drain from my face. My genuine grief was being twisted, catalogued as another symptom of my inherent instability. I hung up the phone and didn't call home for a month. It was around that time that I was recruited by a specialized firm that consulted for the state on complex financial fraud cases. The work was confidential, intense, and incredibly fulfilling. Dr. Albright had recommended me for the position. I took the job, and for the first time, I felt like I had a purpose that was completely separate from my family. I didn't tell them the specifics. I just said I'd taken a new job with more responsibility. I knew if I told them the truth, Erin would find a way to diminish it. She would call it dangerous or inappropriate for someone like me. My work became my secret world, the one place where I was competent and respected. The one place where I was not Rachel, the fragile sister, but Rachel Monroe, the forensic accountant. The case started like any other. A large corporation, a powerful CEO, and whispers of financial misconduct. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized it was a web of staggering complexity. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, a systematic fraud that had siphoned millions of dollars from investors and pension funds. The numbers didn't lie. They told a story of greed and corruption that was breathtaking in its scope. For almost a year, that case consumed me. I worked 12, sometimes 16-hour days. My apartment became a landscape of spreadsheets, legal documents, and empty coffee cups. I ate takeout over my keyboard and fell asleep on the couch, my head full of numbers. The pressure was immense. We were dealing with powerful people who had a lot to lose. The state prosecutor's office was building its case almost entirely on the evidence I was uncovering. The work was isolating. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My colleagues and I spoke in code. I felt the weight of the secrets I was carrying. The stress began to take a physical toll. I had constant headaches. I lost weight. Sometimes at my desk, the room would tilt for a second, the numbers on the screen blurring into meaningless squiggles. A few weeks before everything came to a head, my mother called. "We haven't heard from you, Rachel. Are you all right?" "Erin said you sounded strange the last time you spoke." Erin and I hadn't spoken in 2 months. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with a big project at work." "You're always busy with work," she sighed. "You need to find some balance in your life. Look at your sister. She has a wonderful husband, a beautiful home. She's happy." The comparison was as old as time, but it still found a way to cut me. "My life is fine, Mom." "Well, you just sound tired. You sound frayed." Erin and I were talking, and we're worried you might be heading for some kind of breakdown. A breakdown. That was the word they had been waiting to use my entire life. It was the ultimate validation of their story. I felt a surge of cold anger. "I'm not having a breakdown," I said, my voice tight. "I have to go." I hung up before she could reply. Her words, Erin's words spoken through her, echoed in my head. Frayed. Breakdown. Unstable. The stress from the case and the renewed assault from my family were a toxic combination. I felt like a rope being pulled from both ends, the strands beginning to snap. A few days later, it happened. I was at the office, walking to the copy machine to scan a crucial document. I felt a wave of dizziness, far more intense than before. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to pulse and dim. The cheerful chatter of my colleagues faded into a distant hum. My knees buckled. The world went dark. When I came to, my boss, Mark, was kneeling beside me, his face a mask of concern. Someone had put a pillow under my head. Paramedics were on their way. As they helped me onto a stretcher, I felt a wave of shame so profound it made me want to disappear. I had held it together for so long, under so much pressure, only to fall. Apart over something as simple as walking across a room. Mark insisted on calling my emergency contact. I hadn't updated it in years. It was still my parents' number. He promised he would drive to the hospital to meet me there. And that's how, an hour later, I found myself lying in a sterile emergency room cubicle, the thin curtain doing little to muffle the sounds of the hospital. And that's how my sister Erin came to be there. My parents, of course, had called her. She was the capable one, the one who handled things. She walked in not with a look of concern, but with a look I knew all too well. It was a look of opportunity. The paper on the examination table crinkled under me with every nervous shift of my weight. The air in the small hospital room was cold and smelled of antiseptic, a clean, sharp scent that did nothing to calm the frantic beating in my chest. My work clothes felt rumpled and wrong in this place. Aaron had arrived 10 minutes ago, all brisk efficiency and feigned worry. "Oh, Rachel, what have you done to yourself now?" she'd said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Now, she was perched on the visitor's stool, looking perfectly put together as always, her legs crossed elegantly at the ankle. The doctor, a man with tired eyes and what had seemed like a kind face, was asking me routine questions. "Any history of fainting? Dizziness? Chronic stress?" I opened my mouth to explain the crushing workload, the sleepless nights, the year of relentless pressure. But Erin's voice sliced through the air first. "She's probably on drugs," she said. The words were casual, dropped into the quiet room like a stone into a still pond. A small, knowing smirk played on her lips as she looked at the doctor, sharing a secret. "She's always been unstable." The doctor's pen stopped scratching on his notepad. His kind eyes flickered from Aaron to me, and the kindness was gone. It was replaced by a professional coolness, a sudden distance. In that one moment, I wasn't a patient with a potential medical issue anymore. I was a liability. I was an unreliable witness to my own life. I felt my dignity, already frayed from the embarrassment of collapsing, begin to unravel completely. The story she had been writing for me my entire life was reaching its final damning chapter. His tone changed. "Ma'am, do you use any recreational substances? It's important you're honest with me." It was no longer a gentle inquiry. It was an accusation. He was jotting notes, his pen moving quickly now. I looked at Erin. She leaned back with a satisfied look, as if she'd just solved a puzzle. She was enjoying this. She was watching me fall and was ready to push me the rest of the way. "No," I said, my voice sounding weak and thin even to my own ears. "I don't use drugs. I don't even drink. I have a very demanding job. I think I just collapsed from exhaustion." "A demanding job?" Erin scoffed softly, as if I'd told a silly joke. She looked at the doctor. "She's an accountant. It's not exactly a high-stress field. She just has a tendency to be dramatic." The curtain separating my cubicle from the hallway wasn't pulled all the way shut. I could hear the squeak of nurses' shoes, the low murmur of other people waiting. Erin must have noticed the gap, because she raised her voice just enough for it to carry. "See? She's always defensive," she announced, performing for the doctor and anyone else who might be listening. "Typical addict behavior. Denial." My stomach churned with a nausea that had nothing to do with my collapse. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. This was her masterpiece. She was trying to have me labeled, to have her version of me written into an official medical record, a document that would follow me forever. I felt a familiar heat rise in my face, the old, helpless anger that had been my companion for 30 years. All the years of biting my tongue, of letting her comments slide, of telling myself it wasn't worth the fight, boiled inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down the whole ugly architecture of lies she had built around me. But I didn't. Something in me had shifted. Maybe it was the collapse. Maybe it was just 30 years of exhaustion. I went quiet. I looked down at my hands, then at the worn leather bag sitting on the floor beside me. My fingers twitched. Inside that bag was a thick file folder, a copy of the case summary I was supposed to have scanned. It was heavy with papers, heavy with facts, heavy with the truth of my life's work. It was proof. Not proof that I wasn't a drug addict. How do you prove a negative? But proof of who I really was. Proof of the competent, meticulous person I had become when no one in my family was looking. I clutched the handle of the bag, my knuckles white. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed on the doorframe, making all three of us jump. The door swung open before the doctor could even respond. A tall man in a dark, well-fitting suit stepped inside. He had a serious face and an air of complete authority that seemed to suck all the air out of the small room. He held up a badge. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice calm and firm. "I'm David Sterling from the state prosecutor's office. I'm assigned to the Monroe case. I need to speak with Rachel Monroe immediately." The room froze. The air turned to ice. Aaron's smug expression dissolved into a mask of pure confusion. The doctor stared, his pen hovering over his clipboard. I just looked at the man, my heart doing a slow, heavy drum roll in my chest. The Monroe case. He meant my case. Mr. Sterling's eyes found me on the exam table. "Rachel Monroe?" he asked. Nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He stepped forward, his gaze briefly flicking over my sister and the doctor as if they were furniture. He placed a thin briefcase on the small counter and opened it, pulling out several folders that looked just like the one in my bag. He laid them out. "We've reviewed your final testimony and all the documentation you provided," he said, his voice crisp and professional, the words clean and precise. "The patterns you uncovered, the offshore accounts, it was exceptional work. The grand jury is meeting next week and we need you to testify. Your findings are the backbone of this entire case." Erin's jaw dropped. A small, disbelieving sound escaped her lips. "Testify? Her? You must be mistaken. She's not well. She just collapsed." The prosecutor finally turned his gaze to her, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "There's no mistake," he said flatly. "Miss Monroe's work has been invaluable to the state. We've had a security detail on her for 2 weeks because of the sensitive nature of her findings. She's perfectly well, just overworked." He turned back to me. "Which is why your collapse doesn't surprise us. Your boss, Mark, called me." He was concerned. The doctor's face was a picture of dawning comprehension. The suspicion vanished instantly, replaced by something that looked like awe, and then deep, professional respect. He slowly lowered his clipboard, looking at me as if for the first time. The entire narrative of the room had been rewritten in 30 seconds. I slid off the exam table, my legs feeling steady for the first time all day. I looked at Erin. Her face was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The confidence, the certainty, the casual cruelty, it had all evaporated. She was exposed. Her lies turned to dust by a truth so large and undeniable it filled the entire room. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't need to. I didn't look at her with anger or triumph. I just looked past her. My silent endurance had paid off in a way I never could have imagined. My victory wasn't in shouting. It was in the quiet, methodical work I had done, in the person I had built myself into, far away from her poisonous whispers. "I'm ready," I said to the prosecutor, my voice clear and even. I picked up my bag and followed him out of the room. I did not look back. Every step I took down the bustling hospital corridor felt firm and deliberate. For once, the silence came from Erin, not Rachel. Her inability to speak, to conjure another lie, was the only victory speech I would ever need. Outside, comma. The evening air was cool on my skin. I took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of city rain and exhaust filling my lungs. It was the smell of the real world, my world, and it had never smelled so sweet. My sister's lies couldn't touch me anymore. The truth had walked into the room at the perfect moment. Sometimes justice arrives without a word. Have you ever had a family member twist the truth against you? Comment your story, hit like, and subscribe for more powerful tales where betrayal meets justice.